Okay, these are going to have pictures. Anyway, I'll say there's pictures. The statue of President Lincoln in Julia Davis Park and I have been having conversations lately, mostly one-sided. Anytime I'm downtown, I try to get into the park, even if it's just a drive-through. I always yell out my window at Lincoln, "Good morning, Mr. President. If I could, I'd drive a Lincoln. Seen any good plays lately? How's Jack and Bobby?" Picture of Lincoln. Statue. In the Northern Hemisphere, toilets tend to flush clockwise. On the other side of the equator, they move anti-clockwise. While crossing the equator, it seemed to go straight down. I tried this several times that day when I wasn't having my face rammed into the greased belly button of an obese Popeye wannabe named Neptune, or crawling around on my knees while being flogged by lengths of canvas fire hose. Canvas, a product of hemp, comes from the same roots as cannabis. And then another picture, and an ad you don't have to see. Oh, you're paying for this content. What follows are my explanations/rationale/excuses for having broken the rules of being on parole, not for a drug crime, for smoking marijuana after promising my wife that I would not. Bear in mind, I didn't consciously lie to her when making that promise. After doing so in prison, I talked to the Lord almost continuously for 6 days, asked Him to take away my taste for weed. You might not believe this, but I do consider myself a Christian. That's not in here. I've been taught all my life that God always answers prayer, yes or no. As far as I can tell, my experience that toking is fundamentally a good thing, in spite of the normal legal ramifications, never went away. But I didn't worry much, assuming that God would provide when I needed it. I believe the answer was nope. Months ago at Bridgepoint, a sister who apparently has a better line to God told me that He had told her that I was destined for great things. There's a cloud picture. I like clouds. All the time. No, just when I'm high. A warm 24-pack of diarrhea, 12-ounce cans, has recently been donated to the list of gifts in the Library of Congress, or in my head, that at first glance would seem to be pointlessly produced, having no real utility. Also on that list, a box full of gerbil-related receipts, 6,000 pounds of broken concrete chunks from the Mirror Building parking lot on Broadway, a bread machine, the dying breath in a jar of New York librarian Susan Polk, who was Frank Sinatra's one true love, though she never knew it. She died from choking on a plastic grocery bag. The bag was never properly recycled and ended up killing 2 others, starlings, before it made it to the sanctuary of one of the Pacific plastic gyres, escaping arrest and prosecution. Jesus' first miracle was to turn water into wine. Ben Franklin once wrote that wine was proof that God wanted people to be happy. During the early part of American history, our founding fathers drank a lot of beer, ale, wine, and not much water. Consequently, our revolution was planned and carried out by people who were almost constantly buzzed. However, alcohol, made through the natural process of fermentation, can have negative health effects, including liver cancer. A minister friend of mine, moderate drinker, I assume, recently died of it. Cannabis, the THC of which is organic, created directly, can make you so tired you pass out, but little else. Oh, there's a view from above, sort of Boise and clouds, of course. The reason why so many people keep using it is not just to feel good. THC appears to have significant utility, which some believe outweigh the downsides. As thousands of jazz musicians have discovered, playing and creating music is a much more rewarding experience. I used to spend hours at the piano, high as I can get, playing until my hands numbed. It is a thoroughly wonderful experience. I write easier when I'm loaded. I'm more sociable. I discovered while driving taxi, I know what you're thinking, people who are already skilled and careful drivers become more careful, probably related to the paranoia that sometimes comes with smoke, always to new consumers. Much time is wasted because of misinformation, which skews beliefs and discussion. If you want to know what a goddess worshiper thinks, ask a pagan, not a Catholic. Astronomers are becoming increasingly alarmed as they learn that, through the gradual movement of stars in the night sky, that the inhabitants of this planet will see a new constellation that bears a striking resemblance to Nikita Khrushchev gassing up a truck full of kitchenware. This won't happen, however, for another 27 months, so there's time to emotionally prepare for the beautiful wrongness of that scene if you are in the southern hemisphere. Another picture from the Mirror Building, actually. I see patterns form in what are done and said in my environment. As much as any Christian, I believe I am seeing the hand of God in spite of my fundamental dishonesty with those who love me. I may be as self-deceived as I believe others are when they draw harmful conclusions. A few months ago, after listening to a missionary at church, my wife decided that her income would henceforth all go to missions. We would leave all the household bills for me to pay. Many of her assumptions are at odds with mine. I didn't agree, I just lost the debate. When she says, "We talked about this," I assume that means the subject is closed. Now, I know there was a tradition once, Cindy stay at home and her hubby Barry breadwinner, but that developed in a different kind of economy. Wages haven't kept up with inflation for years. I don't like the feeling when there's no money in my wallet. When you have nothing, there's nothing you can do for someone in need. Purposefully, I have surrendered my economic fate to Jesus as expressed by his employment agents at Gem State Staffing. I'm finding that some of the gigs that pay $10 are too physical for an overweight 55-year-old. Anything that pays $12 pretty much kills me. I've recently negotiated with Jeremiah, a believer, and ended up with a job opportunity that pays $9. Pending the results of a blood test, I plan to start selling plasma again, which would add to our income about $100 per week, actually, at the first week, and then it goes down to $70 a week, I think. That's another few hours I can presumably spend writing while in the lobby or on the machine, but I won't be home. I assume she realizes that. Another picture of the stadium. Yes, you. Among the animal flesh that when cooked don't taste anything like chicken. The one-legged smooch viper, the Botswana soap toad, the clogging koala of North Snortland, the rusty saltine crab, double-trunked fibrillating mammoth, Homo sapiens, donkeys who regularly eat breath mints, the single-lung predatory bunny, a predator bunny, and the noisy-tracked shoefish. I've been considering giving Bridgepoint a break for several reasons, one of which is my discomfort with the rock and roll. Have I mentioned that term first referred to sexual activity? Also, 3 times, I have raised the question with Pastor Jeff about how to justify allowing women to speak in church, given that it's forbidden twice in the New Testament. I'm not insisting that this rule should be followed, just how it can be ignored. The biblical rationale is that Adam was formed first, then Eve. Adam was not deceived about the fruit, but as an act of love for his wife, who bought the snake story, he followed her lead, knowing well the consequences. That's got to be the most powerful act of love that a mortal man ever made. If it's okay for women to talk in church, Maybe it's also okay for them to be ministers. I loved the female ministers among Unitarians. My new job at a bakery starts Sunday morning. Bear in mind this was written a while back. My wife and I had more than one discussion about how this budget thing was supposed to work, one of which resulted in a call to the VA crisis line and a follow-up visit with a social worker. I've not seen evidence that requires us to slowly go broke this way. If the house was suddenly a lot cleaner and new interests were developed, it would sort of make sense. Instead, she stays up late into night playing Farmville. I've asked, and she believes her farms are growing stuff, producing something, which is equivalent to a job. I recognize an actual addiction when I see it. Picture my cats. 2. I have 3. We have 3. The main attraction at the Lamatown, West Virginia Museum of Excusable History is an unopened carton of G. Gordon Liddy brand cigarettes, which never made it to market. People line up for blocks to pay their $2 for a close-up view and some recorded history of the artifact. For an extra $3, tourists can also purchase the 3-hour action-packed documentary on DVD. The late Ray Charles is the narrator. Customers may also view a partly used memo pad that may have been on President Nixon's desk for several weeks. Everybody has addictions, many of which are generally harmless. I don't feel right unless my lips have a recent coat of chapstick or equivalent. Speaking of which, the only thing missing in my life right now. This is very human, I hope. It's intended to be. I have a fondness for the donuts they give away at Bridgepoint, but all that starch and sugar can be harmful. A white rat study proved that an addiction to cocaine can be overcome by trading it for a white sugar addiction. People give sugar to their kids, even babies, and most Americans are addicts. When an addiction results in detrimental and observable health effects, it's time to call in the counselors. My wife has diabetes, a result of bad eating habits. She does not appear to follow any sort of diet. It don't bother me much, but her belly sticks out more than her breasts. She can eat as many donuts and junk as I, though I'm not usually affected by the munchies. I know an actual addiction when I see one. It seems disingenuous for a dangerously addicted person to judge another with a harmless addiction. There are criminal penalties, but they are artificial and unjust. Nobody has ever died from ingesting marijuana. She is certainly justified in that I didn't keep my word. I have a real problem with public clocks that are not set correctly. Oh, there's supposed to be a picture there. I'm not talking about a few days lapse in adjusting to the time change. I mean banks and other businesses that likely spent thousands building a stone tower in the parking lot to display information that is useful. If accurate data doesn't matter, why pay for a public clock? If someone doesn't make sure the clock is set correctly, what, nobody noticed? They are presenting disinformation, much worse than no information at all. Depending on whether the clock is 7 minutes fast or slow, a person might slow down and become late for an appointment, or speed up unnecessarily and have an accident. Grass is the only medicine I have found to work on both my depression and anxiety. While high, I am at peace with the world. Colors are brighter. God's creation becomes more beautiful. I never just thank the Lord for the beautiful day when I'm straight. When stoned, I do it all the time. Now maybe God is mad as fark because I'm enjoying something useful, which He provides, but it doesn't seem so. Factory work with repetitive, boring tasks can be done easier with fewer defects at a reasonable level of stoned. Telephone work is easier, and people with some charm become more charming. It increases stamina some, but mostly only in the short term. I can be around people who know me well, as stoned as I can get, and nobody seems to notice except for the skunk breath. By the way, my friend Randy told me today, in my experience also, I can talk to a cop when I'm stoned, and he has no fucking clue. Or at least, my normal idiosyncrasies aren't much different. I also have a television addiction, which I tried to forestall when wife wanted to order Netflix. Being an addict, however, my objection was weak. If a stoner wants to, he can spend a lot of time being entertained by mindless TV. Picture my cat. Among the list of medical conditions that are surprisingly difficult to treat, having your head up your butt, having a stick up your butt, tunnel vision, X-ray only vision, mystical toad wart, which grows to the size and shape of a toad, can only be cured by killing the toad with the one that resembles you, if he doesn't get you first. Silent and deadly flatulence, elderly wet fart syndrome, emphasis on wet, key grip, phasing in and out of this dimension, hero addiction, acne. I do not believe that THC will make an idiot smarter, but I've never shared a bong with someone that stupid. It also doesn't make smart people stupid, but more thoughtful and occasionally forgetful. I feel like I'm in charge of my own mental health. I believe I'm sticking it to Big Pharma, which has hooked a whole generation on deadly opium-based drugs, which are legal, sells billions of pills for mental conditions that don't work, and would hate for Joe and Jane Average to start growing their own medicine in the backyard. Essentially, when I'm stoned, I feel appreciative, blessed, gentle, and now that I'm following a higher, admittedly unconventional calling, I would switch to a replacement therapy with the same benefits at any time. Picture Popeye. I'm back at the rescue mission, which seems more at home than I feel at home. I wish I knew why this is so strong. I know the river of life reminds me of boot camp, which I somewhat enjoyed. The camaraderie of a bunch of guys who, for the most part, don't mean anybody any harm. A few of the guys I knew from before are still there, or back like me. I've seen a known hypocrite, liar, and snitch who doesn't like me. I'm hurt. Eric, the dark-skinned fag with the meth habit, is always good for conversation. Terry, who I sometimes call Gordo, good-natured fat guy, and his oxygen machine are still there. Frankie, I call Francisco, left the sanctuary yesterday and is back already. Of course, it also reminds me of being incarcerated, which I had 5 years to get used to. Being able to come and go at will makes all the difference. Long before I became a user, I argued that cannabis, which Tom Jefferson made into an intoxicating tea, had way more going for it than against it. When I finally tried it myself, I found, as usual, there are many myths about weed, good and bad, that are simply untrue. I started smoking cannabis while in my 40s, while driving taxi. This was after several years of oftentimes getting my tips in the form of a nugget of weed wrapped in cigarette pack cellophane, which I usually gave to my friend Randy, who was a user. I'm fairly sure I'll be a frequent user when my parole is over. If I end up having to go to drug classes, I'll have something else to write about to compare it to actual laws of the universe. If the worst happens and I become a martyr to the legalization movement, I will at least have time to write that for various reasons. I don't usually get it home. I will at least have time to write that for various reasons. I don't usually get it home. For one thing, I won't spend hours watching West Wing and Star Trek. I'll need a publisher or sponsor since I won't be getting any familial support. My writing skills must have value under some circumstances, whether I'm free or a captive. I need to make some income with my writing. picture of the neighbor and her kid. Months ago, I had a conversation with my PO, asked him what would happen if I, doing so well so far, was caught with grass. He said I'd likely have to pay for drug classes. He never piss tested me again. Can a person be a stoner and a Christian at the same time? I believe I have met several. At Bridgepoint, I know of at least a few social drinkers. Unless someone can demonstrate how that is different, it seems to me that they are equivalent. People consume sugar to feel good. If grass is more effective at achieving that goal with fewer physical downsides, why is that bad? Jesus can be labeled a drinker, assuming he was willing to consume what he created from water. I'm not suggesting that he would have consumed cannabis unless he had a medical reason to do so. Way unlikely, since he was a healer. Am I an addict? Certainly. I'm also breaking laws, my word, and a parole agreement. I don't believe I am excusing myself. A couple weeks ago, it was alleged by a minister at church that slaves should be obedient, not try and run away. Before and during our Civil War, runaway slaves were breaking both man's and God's law. Engaging in revolutionary behavior to free slaves, if slavery is legal, would be an act of treason. The slavery question was the issue that split up the Northern and Southern Baptists. So maybe God would be on the side of the Confederation. By the same token, our revolt from England, proper authority, to become our own nation would also be considered treason, which must be a sin. If that's not correct, then perhaps there are justified rebellions against tyrannies after all. Unnecessary restrictions on people in pursuit of happiness, practices which harm no one, and, I strongly advocate, can do some people a lot of good, may be cause for civil disobedience. I'll bet a lot more people smoke, vape, or bake with marijuana than my associates would believe. What is this fixation people have with what other people ingest anyway? A little bigger picture of Popeye. Growing a plant. Wonder what that would be. I bet I can do another one tonight.